Hi everybody, my name is Gail Tucker and I'm here to do your first video. And it's kind of delayed because I had some 540 videos done a while back. I haven't taught this class in a little bit, so I wanted to freshen up and do a new video. So here we go. I also freshened up my templates and examples, and I just posted that in the announcements section. Your first paper is called Healthcare Research and the Scientific Method. So I actually typed up pretty much a template, but under each section there is some explanation of how I would address the section. So I did use headers, which is required by APA 7th edition. I don't mean this running head, I mean these here. So you have the title of the paper is repeated on the first page of the body of the paper. Then you go into a level 1 header and a level 1 header. These are just dividing up the sections of the paper. And when you have like subsections, then you go to a level 2 header. Each one of the headers is formatted differently in APA. You just have to look it up either online or if you have the APA guidelines in a book. And so my husband is getting ready to make a cameo in our video, it looks like. He always presents after I get started, but maybe he's not. Thought he's going to sneak in there. So I've set this up in the way that I would like you to set it up. It's in proper APA format, and it will then allow you to make sure you get all the sections. This is how I grade your paper. I go exactly from the criteria of the assignment, and I just look to see, do you have a header on that section? That means that's where you address the criteria for that part. And here's validity, and here's sample size. So if you don't have those headers, and it's just one long paragraph, I don't really know where to find the stuff that you've written to meet the criteria to grade the paper. And when I'm grading like 20 papers, I really don't like to search through those paragraphs, and you don't want me to, because if I'm searching that closely, I'm going to find a lot more errors. I'm going to start micrograding. So make it easy for me, and it'll be easy for yourself too, because you know at the end of the paper that you've actually done each part. And it is easy to get lost and kind of go in different rabbit holes on these things. So this keeps you organized and focused, okay? So I have the different areas, and for each paper you of course want an introduction and conclusion. I've placed those there. I use an example in this of primary care and PPE, or personal protective equipment. In this paper you get to choose a scenario of either primary care, community care, which would be like a public health center. Each county usually has a county public health, or you may have a mental health center that's by the county. That's a community care scenario, or Indian health services, if you will, which is IHS. Or you may, if you are in the military, you may be familiar with that. If you're on base, what the community health services are there. Or transitional care. And when they say transitional care, what I think of is when a person is dismissed from a hospital, but they're not quite ready to go home, they go to a transitional care, which is usually some type of step-down area, such as a long-term care, a skilled care, something like that. That's transitional care. Okay, so you're going to take this scenario and you're going to apply how you would handle future research in this area. And this was kind of hard when I looked at it, but this is how I would address it, okay? I would go in and try to find a research study on either primary care, community care, or transitional care. And how you can do that is just go into your GCU library, and you're going to type like primary care, and in this case I did primary care and personal protective equipment, because that's kind of a hot topic with our most recent pandemic, right? Or you may want to do primary care and vaccinations, or whatever it is, okay? So when you type that in the GCU website, then it will pop up various scholarly or research-based articles, okay? And that's what you need for your references. You're not going to websites, you're not going to WebMD. Those are not true research. Those are for civilians, okay? You are in healthcare now, and you're a professional, so you want to go to evidence-based research, which is a research study, okay? So if you are not using the GCU library, or you can use Google Scholar. If you don't have Google Scholar or don't know how to get into it, what I did, and I'll show you my websites that I went to here, I typed in scholarly and primary and PPE, and I came up with some studies, okay? So one of them was truly about, well, that's the research one, I'm sorry, was about PPE in primary care. So it hit on exactly what I needed. What you're looking for then is in the study, you will have an area either in conclusion or in limitations. This one has strengths and limitations. They also have some of it in the discussion area. So it's at the tail end of your study that you're looking at. It's going to tell you about the gaps in research, okay? That's what you're looking at, is where is there a gap in research that I could use for my scenario, okay? So in this one, it's saying that the study was pretty good. They came up with the results that they wanted to, or that they anticipated. But you'll see here that it says a limitation of the study is that it only included studies published in English. So since this study looked at primary care patients' values, things like that, in other cultures and other languages, they would need to use different words, different descriptors, because possibly in the other countries or in other languages, they describe that feeling that primary care patients had in different words. So they identified that as an area for future research. In other words, this was all done in English, so maybe it doesn't totally translate over correctly to another language if they were going to try to mirror the study or repeat it in, let's say, Brazil, okay? Also down here, I found another area where it showed a gap. It said there were no studies from low-income countries, nor about patients' or children's specific values. Further research may be needed to concentrate on these two blind spots. That's what you're looking for. Now I've identified a gap. So in my paper, I can say that there is research on this study. I do an in-text citation after I describe it. The research identified this gap. And so in a scenario, you could describe the research that you would then do. So you could replicate this study that they did, but you would want to do it in primary care of low-income countries, let's say, or about parents and children's specific values, okay? So then when you go into your paper, that's what you're going to describe. You're going to act like you're a researcher and that you've identified this gap, and you're going to research now this area in primary care, okay? So then you're also going to talk about what you would do with sample size, what you would do differently. Well, the sample size of this one, if you go up, let's see what they say was their sample size. Sorry, it's going to spin through this very quickly here. They'll always say how many participants they had, and that's your sample size, okay? And you may even be able to find it in the abstract, but you're going to need full length for identifying a research and a research study and the gaps needed. Let's see. That is not giving it to me. It looked like in this that they looked at articles. They actually reviewed articles rather than people. It looks like were fully screened. Data was extracted. Okay, so they looked at all these studies and they reviewed them. They looked at 1,817 articles, and of those articles, only 68 came up with what they really needed, and that's what were fully screened. And they did all of these articles came from high income populations, and they were all done in English. Okay. So in your sample size, for example, you might say, well, they only found 68 articles in English that they could review. So in my study, I would like to look at the studies that are done in Mexico in Spanish, and I'd like to identify a few more, like maybe 100 studies, and that would be my sample for my research. And then you would look at what they did for their statistics and see what you would add to that or do differently. Also at the validity, how can you ensure that this article or that your research that you're doing is valid, that it has validity? Well, one thing is with your sample size, with your generalizability, can it be generalized to other populations? Things like that. So this one is kind of a wonky article, so it's actually not talking about participants as in people. You hopefully will find a research study that does talk about actual participants and sample size, how many people were involved in the study. So this one's a little wonky that way, sorry, but they do have what they looked at. Their sample size was the number of articles they reviewed for their study. Okay, so then I wanted to see maybe what needed to be done differently in research and statistics in primary care. So I came up with another article that talked about why and how to use mixed methods in primary care. And so that could be something that you could use to talk about what different statistics you might use. You first tell what they did, and then talk about, well, maybe they needed to use some mixed methods because that's a need in primary care, and this is my reference that's saying that, okay? So that's how I would put together my paper, and I know that this kind of borderlines on statistics class, which was not ever my favorite class or not ever my favorite thing to do. But we do have to do this. You're graduating from a master's program. You are going to be using evidence-based research and projects in your management style. So not only do you need to be able to carry out those projects, but you need to be able to read and analyze research studies. So you can see, say you want to start a new project at your hospital involving infection control and hand washing. So you're going to do your lit review, and when you're doing that, you need to look at what articles are good studies. Did they have an adequate sample size? Did they prove what they were trying to prove? Was it statistically significant? Things like that. So that's what we're trying to teach you, is to plunge into these and look at them really close so that you can actually use research in your career as a healthcare administrator. Okay, I'm closing out now. Thanks everybody, and take care.